The privilege stops now, my husband said, declaring that from this point on we'd have separate budgets. I agreed, fully aware he'd soon regret it. Come Sunday, his family arrived for their usual lunch, but the instant my mother-in-law entered the kitchen, she shrieked so loudly that even the neighbors ran out of their houses. My husband thought he had me cornered, that he could dictate my worth, my entire existence. But what he didn't realize was that he just handed me the weapon I needed to reclaim my life. And on that fateful Sunday, when my mother-in-law walked into my kitchen, her scream wasn't just shock, it was the sound of their entire world collapsing. What do you think happened next? You know, it all started on a Friday night. I'd just spent hours, literally hours, slaving away in the kitchen, putting together a 3-course dinner for Leonard's parents. And then, my husband, Leonard, looked at me with this sickening, calculated calm, and he just said it. Just like that. Your comfortable life at my expense? It's over. Can you believe that? His exact words. Said in the very living room we bought, you know, the one mostly paid for with money I inherited from my incredible Grandma Teresa. I can still hear his voice. So cold, so detached. It was like he was signing a business contract, not utterly shattering the foundation of our marriage. You know, some humiliations don't hit you like a punch. They don't even sting right away. They seep in. Like slow, silent poison. Paralyzing you before you even realize what's happening. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Like everything you do, every effort, every sacrifice, just doesn't count? It's devastating. And the worst part? You get used to it. Little by little. Until one day, something just snaps. And you explode. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when a woman finally gets tired of tolerating everything and decides it's time to start charging for her worth. It all kicked off right after his parents, Veronica and Mr. Charles Bennett, finally left. Every other Friday, it was the same drill, they'd come to visit their son. In reality, it meant I spent at least 6 hours cooking, cleaning, arranging flowers, making sure every single corner of the house was spotless. All just so Veronica could do her grand inspection and deliver one of her signature passive-aggressive jabs about my little graphic design hobby. She always loved to say it was nice I had something to keep me busy, as if my work, my actual job, wasn't real work. That evening, the conversation inevitably turned to how we'd managed to buy such a beautiful house in the suburbs, just outside New York City. And Leonard? Oh, he puffed out his chest with pride. He went on and on about his hard work, his vision, how he'd invested so wisely. Conveniently, he left out one tiny detail: most of the down payment had come directly from my inheritance. The second that front door clicked shut behind his parents, he turned to me. That arrogant, dismissive smile I'd always hated? It was plastered across his face. Sweetheart, he drawled, starting with the next payment, we're doing separate budgets. Your comfortable life at my expense? It's over. He said it with this chilling, calm confidence. Like he had everything perfectly under control. He expected me to shatter. To beg. To cry. But all I felt was this cold, hard chill running down my spine. The sheer injustice of his words hit me. It was like a truth I'd always known, buried deep, finally bursting into plain sight. See, I was the one burning the midnight oil, working until 2 a.m. on my tablet, designing logos, editing videos, churning out freelance projects for clients. I was the one managing the household accounts, doing the shopping, paying the bills, decorating every single room with my taste, with my money. Every Sunday, I cooked like it was a royal feast for his parents, appetizers, main course, dessert, only to have Veronica dissect the sauce or criticize the way the meat was cooked. To them? All of that was invisible. It was just my duty as a wife. Expected. Never appreciated. My financial contributions, even if they sometimes varied, were dismissed as a whim. And my inheritance? Just luck that didn't count. Something Leonard conveniently chose to erase from his memory. In that agonizing moment, everything clicked. It was painfully, blindingly clear. He didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as a luxury employee. A woman he was supporting. I can still picture the first time that feeling of utter invisibility really hit me. It was our very first Sunday lunch in this house. I had spent 2 full days preparing roasted pork, using my Grandma Teresa's cherished recipe. I was so excited, so proud, so desperate to please. And when Veronica took that first bite, she just said, "It's a bit dry. Next time, dear, let me supervise you so it turns out better." "Leonard?" He said nothing. He just lowered his head, kept eating, and gave his mother this faint, approving smile. That day, I understood. Every Sunday was going to be a test. And I was destined to fail. My kitchen, my creative space, my sanctuary, had been twisted into a courtroom. And I was always the accused, never allowed to defend myself. Even the beautiful quartz countertop, the one I'd chosen and paid for with my own money, seemed to mock me. A silent, gleaming witness to my ignored efforts and my rapidly growing resentment. So, when Leonard hurled that phrase at me on Friday, I could see it in his eyes. He was expecting a scene. His posture, the way his jaw was clenched, everything screamed he was ready for a confrontation. He wanted my tears. My anger. The same old fight that always ended with him playing the magnanimous one, the powerful man setting boundaries. I bet he even had his entire speech rehearsed, all about financial responsibility and how it was for our own good. He needed to reaffirm himself as the ultimate provider, the head of the household, a role his parents had relentlessly drilled into him. But that night? The woman he thought he knew? The one who quietly endured criticism, who tried so hard to please everyone. She was gone. Something inside me just shifted. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was like a spark ignited deep in my mind. All the pain, all the years of humiliation, they condensed into one single, razor-sharp idea. The frantic voices in my head, the ones trying to justify him or blame myself? They went silent. Absolute silence. And it was powerful. Full of terrifying, beautiful possibility. I looked him straight in the eyes. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't see the man I'd fallen in love with. Just a stranger. Acting out a role his mother had clearly written for him. And in that profound silence, I found my answer. To his utter shock, I smiled. Not forced. Not sarcastic. It was real. Calm. Almost a relief. I looked up at him, and I said, softly, "Excellent idea, darling. It's about time we had some financial clarity." His reaction? It was almost comical. He just stared. Mouth hanging slightly open. Totally unsure if I was serious or mocking him. He blinked. Several times. Confused. But I kept my tone steady. Confident. There would be no war that night. No tears. Instead, I gave him my deadliest weapon, my composure. I picked up my tablet from the coffee table, the very same one I spent hours working on, and I turned it on. The soft glow of the screen illuminated my face. "Let's get started," I said. "How about we make a list of shared and individual expenses? That way, everything will be ready for the next payment cycle. I want this to be fair for both of us." His confusion twisted into something else now. Something close to fear. He wasn't ready for that. My calmness. My sudden, chilling efficiency. He wanted drama. But I gave him a business meeting. And within seconds, the power shifted. He didn't even realize it. That night, while Leonard slept soundly beside me, I couldn't close my eyes. My tablet rested on my lap, but I wasn't working for a client. No. I was working on something far more important, my escape plan. I meticulously listed every single household task I performed: meal planning, grocery shopping, cleaning, budgeting, coordinating maintenance. Every single invisible job that kept our life, his life, running smoothly. And next to each task, I looked up the going rates for those services in New York City. A personal chef, a housekeeper, a household manager, an event planner. The numbers stacked up, one by one, until they formed this absolutely stunning total. That's when I knew. I knew exactly what I would do. My plan for Sunday lunch? It began to take shape. A plan that was both beautiful and utterly terrifying. The financial clarity Leonard claimed to want? Oh, it was about to arrive. Just not in the way he ever imagined. Saturday morning. The house felt different. The air was thick, heavy with this quiet, simmering tension. No clattering pots. No comforting smell of spices. No frantic rush of me trying to make everything perfect. Leonard came downstairs, probably expecting to find me in the kitchen, maybe regretful, maybe worried. Instead, he found me sitting on the patio sofa, a cup of coffee in my hand, my tablet resting on my lap. He just stared. Silently. Waiting for me to speak. I looked up, and I smiled. Calmly. "Good morning, darling," I said. I slept wonderfully. His face. Oh, it was priceless. He didn't understand anything. See, peace had become my new weapon. And he had no defense against it. He didn't realize the woman he'd humiliated the night before? She was gone. In her place, a strategist had emerged. One who'd spent the entire night calculating the exact, precise price of her freedom. All day, he tried to provoke me, throwing out snide comments about how nice it must be to enjoy my day off, as if he didn't know my weeks were filled with endless work, with sleepless nights. At one point, while I was deep in concentration on one of my designs, he walked behind me and said, mockingly, "Good thing you have time for your little drawings." Each word from him? It just carved a deeper chasm between us. In the past, phrases like that would have stung. Made me feel guilty. Or lazy. But now? Every single comment was just another line on the mental invoice I was drafting. I listened without reacting. I nodded with a calm serenity that I could tell was driving him absolutely insane. And in my mind, I just added an extra charge for emotional damage. He didn't realize he wasn't talking to his wife anymore. He was talking to a service provider. One who was about to hand him a very, very expensive bill. His arrogance? It was just fuel. Fueling my new, unshakable determination. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store. But this wasn't the usual weekend shopping trip. No pork ribs for his father. No expensive wine his mother adored. No ingredients for those elaborate family feasts. This time, I walked the aisles with a completely different purpose. I bought Greek yogurt. Just for me. A good salmon fillet. Avocados. Blueberries. That specialty coffee I love. Every item I placed in that cart was a silent declaration of independence. At the checkout, I paid with my own card. And I felt this small, but incredibly powerful satisfaction. It was the first time in a long, long while that I bought food just for me. For my taste. My health. My needs. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like the very first step toward reclaiming my space. Not just in the house, but in my entire life. When I got back and started putting away my groceries, I just stood there for a moment. Staring at the kitchen. That dream kitchen. With its veined white quartz island, its gleaming stainless steel appliances. It was my pride. I had designed it myself. Chosen every single detail, from the cabinet handles to the lighting. And, most importantly, I had paid for it. With a large portion of the money my Grandma Teresa had left me. I remembered her words the day she gave me the inheritance papers. It's for you to build your independence, sweetheart. Not anyone else's. A wave of guilt washed over me. I'd betrayed her. I'd allowed my investment to become the stage for my own servitude. But that guilt quickly hardened. It solidified into a decision, firm as steel. I would honor her memory. And this kitchen? This kitchen would become the place where my independence was reborn. As the sun dipped below the New York City skyline, a sliver of doubt tried to creep into my mind. I sat on the porch. Was I being too drastic? Maybe I should just talk to him. Try one more time to make him understand. But then, like a cold ghost, a memory from last Christmas flashed into my mind. 3 days. I'd spent 3 solid days cooking for 20 of his relatives. I was utterly exhausted, but I felt this quiet sense of satisfaction. Until I heard Veronica whisper to her sister, "Poor Leonard. He works so hard while Marianne just plays house." And Leonard? He was standing right there. And he smiled. No one defended me. That memory? It obliterated any flicker of hesitation. No. I wasn't being drastic. I was being fair. For the very first time, I was putting myself first. Dinner that Saturday was surreal. I ordered a salad from a nearby restaurant. Just for myself. Leonard kept glancing at me, waiting for me to offer him some. I didn't. He quietly got up and made himself a pathetic ham and cheese sandwich with the oldest bread he could find in the pantry. We ate in a heavy, suffocating silence. Broken only by the clink of silverware. He expected me to crack. To find the quiet unbearable. To eventually cry or yell. But I savored every single bite of my salad. With a calm that was entirely new. I was tasting the flavor of my own self-assertion. He had demanded separate budgets. Clear rules. And I was giving them to him, to the letter. What he utterly failed to understand was that his attempt to control me had actually set me free. The cage he'd built for me? It had just opened. And I was learning to fly again. Right there, inside my own home. Sunday morning. It arrived with an almost eerie peace. I woke up early, just like always. But instead of rushing to the kitchen to marinate meat or prepare dessert, I made myself a cup of tea. And I went out to the patio to read. The city sunlight began to warm the air, and the house was utterly silent. No clanging pots. No aroma of frying garlic. Just birdsong and the soft whisper of the breeze. For the first time in years, a Sunday morning didn't feel like the start of another unpaid workday. It felt like what it was supposed to be, a day of rest. I felt this deep, profound peace. The kind that settles over you when you know you're about to reclaim what's rightfully yours. Leonard finally shuffled downstairs around 9. His eyes swept across the spotless, empty kitchen. A sharp line of worry etched itself across his forehead. "Don't tell me you're not cooking." "My parents are coming at 1, he stammered, his voice almost childish. Like a little kid afraid his birthday party was about to be cancelled. I looked at him over the top of my book. And I replied, as naturally as if we were discussing the weather, "No, sweetheart." Sunday lunches were part of my household management services. And since we now have separate budgets? Well, that service comes with a fee. If you'd like to hire me, we can discuss the rates. His expression morphed. From confusion, to disbelief, then to barely contained anger. I could almost hear the frantic gears turning in his head, desperately trying to regain control. But I wasn't playing his game anymore. A few minutes later, his phone rang. Of course. It was Veronica. I could hear him from the living room, speaking in this low, tense voice. Yes, Mom. Everything's fine. Yes, of course. Something simpler today. A surprise. I heard the sickening falseness in his tone. The raw panic hidden beneath it. The man who always bragged about being in control, the provider, the head of the family? He was now truly trapped in his own twisted web. He hung up. And he looked at me with a fury I had truly never seen before. Fix this, Marianne, he ordered. His voice wasn't arrogant anymore. It was desperate. I simply shook my head. I'm sorry, Leonard. You set the rules. With a calmness that genuinely surprised even me, I picked up my tablet. The very same one he always dismissed as my little drawing toy. I opened the spreadsheet app where I'd drafted my plan on Friday night, and I created a new document. Clean. Professional. Just like the ones I present to my best clients. At the very top, in bold, elegant lettering, I typed, invoice for cooking and household management services. I began breaking down the costs, menu planning, purchasing quality ingredients, preparation and cooking, 6 hours of labor at the rate of a private chef, table service, and cleanup. Each line had a value. Based on real market prices in New York City. The total? It was beautiful. Neat. Round. And absolutely, unequivocally fair. My work tool had officially become the instrument of my own justice. When the clock finally struck 1, I walked over to the refrigerator. I took out the salmon, avocados, and fresh vegetables I had bought. With slow, steady movements, I began preparing my own lunch. At the same time, I grabbed a roll of labels and a marker. I opened the Greek yogurt and wrote, clearly, property of Marianne. I did the same with my coffee. My fruit. My bottle of wine. It was a small, almost absurd gesture. But it was overflowing with meaning. I was drawing a line. Not just in the fridge. But in our lives. He wanted separation? I was giving it to him. In the most literal, undeniable way possible. I could hear his restless footsteps pacing through the living room, a frantic rhythm marking time until the inevitable moment. The doorbell was about to ring. And I was ready. The show was about to begin. Exactly at 1 o'clock, the doorbell shrieked. A sharp, piercing sound cutting through the silence of the house like a knife. Each vibration ran down my spine, not with fear, but with a strange, thrilling sense of anticipation. It was the signal. The moment I had been preparing for. I watched Leonard leap from the sofa, as if jolted by electricity. His face was pale, slick with sweat, a roadmap of pure panic. He practically ran to the door, smoothing his shirt, trying to plaster on a smile that never, ever reached his eyes. He was about to play his usual role, the perfect husband, the doting son, the confident host, the illusion of a happy family, the man of the house. He had no idea the foundations of his carefully constructed castle were about to crumble. From my vantage point on the patio, my coffee still warm in my hand, I felt like I was watching a play. I was the director. And he? He was the tragic protagonist, blissfully unaware he was about to face the final act. The second he opened the door, his transformation was instant. His voice became loud, artificially cheerful. That rehearsed, sickening tone I knew so well. Mom! Dad! Welcome! Come in, please. Veronica and Mr. Charles Bennett swept in with the entitled confidence of people who genuinely felt they owned the place. Veronica, in her flawless white linen suit that probably cost more than my last design invoice, scanned the room. When she didn't see me, she lifted her chin, a clear sign of disdain. How strange, she announced loudly. It doesn't smell like anything today. Usually, you can smell the roast pork from the entrance. Mr. Bennet, ever the silent observer, just let his eyes sweep the living room, taking in the stillness, the absence of the usual chaotic bustle that always signaled their arrival. The first stone had been thrown. And I hadn't even moved. Leonard, now visibly sweating, tried desperately to distract his parents. Today, he stammered, I wanted to give you a surprise, something different. Why don't you sit in the living room? Can I get you something to drink? A glass of wine? Maybe whiskey? His attempt to act like the perfect host was utterly pathetic. He never served the drinks. That had always been my job. Veronica completely ignored him. She set her ridiculously expensive designer purse down on the sofa I had chosen and paid for. Her goal was crystal clear. She wasn't going to be distracted by a mere drink. First, I'll go to the kitchen to see if Marianne needs help, she declared, her voice dripping with venom. She's probably overwhelmed by the surprise she prepared. That word, surprise, dripped with sarcasm. To her, I was utterly incapable of doing anything right without her supervision. She couldn't wait to find a mistake, any excuse, to reassert her supposed superiority. With the determination of a general inspecting her troops, she marched toward the kitchen. Leonard tried to stop her, placing a pleading hand on her arm. Mom, really, there's no need. I'll take care of it, he practically whimpered. She brushed him off impatiently, like swatting away a bothersome child. Don't be ridiculous, Leonard. I know your wife. She probably needs help. And without waiting for an answer, she stormed down the hallway. From my seat on the patio, through the glass door, I had a perfect, cinematic view of the unfolding scene. I saw Leonard's stiff back, his helpless, slumped shoulders. And I didn't feel an ounce of pity. What I felt was this strange, almost delicious calm. It was poetic justice. He had unleashed the storm with his arrogance. Now, he would have to face the hurricane he himself had summoned, his own mother. The serenity that filled me was so profound, it almost felt supernatural. The peace of knowing that, for the very first time, the script was entirely in my hands. It was in that brief, pregnant moment of silence, just before the storm fully broke, that I heard the sentence that truly sealed my decision. Mr. Bennet, who had lingered near the door, quietly approached his son. Everything okay, son? You look nervous. Leonard's reply was a venomous whisper, full of contempt. But I caught every single, horrifying word. It's nothing, Dad. She's just being dramatic again. I had to put her in her place about the money. She'll get over it once she realizes she can't live without my credit card. Every single word. Another nail in the coffin of our marriage. This wasn't an argument or a misunderstanding. This was how he truly saw me. A burden. A parasite. A woman who, in his twisted mind, couldn't survive without him. In that instant, my plan stopped being a mere lesson. It became a sentence. Veronica marched into the kitchen. The silence that followed? It spoke volumes. I didn't even need to move. I could picture the entire scene perfectly. Her eyes, scanning the spotless white quartz counters. The dry, gleaming sink. The cold stove. The tightly closed cabinets. Everything immaculate. Like a magazine photo. But utterly, completely lifeless. She'd expected the heady scent of spices. The comforting warmth of the oven. The cheerful bubbling of pots. Instead, she found sterile silence. The stark, jarring emptiness of a broken routine. I could almost feel her confusion, her mind racing, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe she thought the food was in the patio oven. Or that everything was ready and I was just waiting to serve. But that profound stillness? It had to be eating away at her. And then it came. The scream. Oh, it wasn't just a startled shriek. It was a roar of pure fury. A guttural sound that ripped through the air, shaking the very walls of the house. It was the cry of a queen who had been utterly defied. A matriarch who had not received her expected tribute. I heard the hurried footsteps of Leonard and Mr. Bennet, practically charging toward the kitchen. They burst in to find Veronica standing rigid in the middle of the tiled floor I had chosen. Her face was bright red. One trembling finger was pointing, accusingly, at the refrigerator. Her expression? A terrifying mix of pure rage and absolute disbelief. As if she'd discovered an act of treason, not just an empty kitchen. The show had officially reached its first climax. Leonard's face, it just changed. Confusion gave way to blinding panic. Then to cold, simmering fury as his eyes finally locked onto mine. I stood in the doorway leading to the patio, watching everything unfold with a calmness that must have seemed utterly inhuman to him. In my hands was my tablet. My work tool. That little drawing toy he used to mock. The lit screen cast a soft, almost angelic glow over my face. The tension in the room was so thick, you could practically cut it with a knife. Mr. Bennet's gaze darted from his wife, to me, then back to his son, desperately trying to make sense of the chaos. But Veronica? She didn't need explanations. To her, the culprit was standing right there. Before her very eyes. Her small, dark pupils locked onto mine, burning with a fury that promised war. I knew it then. I was about to face the unleashed wrath of a woman who had never, ever heard the word no. Before Leonard could stutter out an excuse, or his father could even think to intervene, Veronica took a deep, shaky breath. And then she spoke. In a tone that sliced through the air like a whip. "Would you care to explain what this means, Marianne?" she spat, each word dripping with pure, unadulterated disdain. "Is this supposed to be a joke? It's 1:15. Where's the lunch you were supposed to make?" That emphasis on supposed to? It said everything. To her, I wasn't family. I was staff. Her cook. Her hostess. Her personal guarantee of comfort. She didn't ask if I was okay. If something had happened. No. She only cared about her meal. Her routine. Her right to be served in my house. She was so utterly certain of her power over me that it never even crossed her mind that I might actually have a reason. Without saying a single word, I stepped forward. The silence in the kitchen grew impossibly heavier. I lifted my tablet. And I slowly turned the screen toward them. The document I had meticulously prepared on Friday night glowed with stark, professional precision. At the very top, in an elegant font I had designed myself, the title read, "Invoice, Sunday Lunch Services." I just let the image speak for itself. I saw confusion flicker on Mr. Bennet's face. Veronica's fury? It visibly dissolved into sheer bewilderment. And pure, unadulterated terror. It flashed in Leonard's eyes. Only he, understood immediately what he was seeing. He had asked for financial clarity, hadn't he? Well, I was handing it to him. On a silver platter. With a calm so profound, so cold, it seemed to chill the very air, I raised the tablet higher. Letting the bluish light of the screen wash over their stunned faces. The silence in the kitchen pressed in on my ears. Mr. Bennet blinked. Repeatedly. As if trying to focus on a reality that simply didn't make sense to him. Veronica, though? She'd gone from fiery, indignant anger to absolute, total confusion. So complete, it seemed to erase every thought from her mind. Her mouth opened and closed. Soundlessly. Like a fish out of water. But it was Leonard's face that stayed etched in my memory. Like a photograph. His skin was waxy, pale. His features tight, drained of all color. His eyes, fixed on the screen, held no anger. No wounded pride. Only raw, naked fear. The fear of a man watching the carefully built house of cards of his control collapse. With one simple breath of truth. Veronica was the first to break the suffocating silence. She did it with a laugh. A sharp, hollow sound. It wasn't sincere. Or amused. It was the nervous reflex of someone desperately trying to regain control of a situation that was clearly, irrevocably slipping away. "Oh, please, Marianne." "What a silly joke," she scoffed, feigning calm. "Come on now. Stop the theatrics. Turn that thing off and tell us what you prepared for lunch. You must be hiding it somewhere to surprise us." She stepped toward me, that forced, condescending smile she used to remind everyone who she thought was in charge, plastered on her face. She even lifted her hand to pat my arm, almost maternally. But I didn't move. Her hand met only empty air. Her smile vanished. Instantly. My eyes never left hers. "It's not a joke, Veronica," I said slowly. "It's a business proposal." My voice sounded strangely foreign, alien. As if it didn't belong in that house. It was the voice of an executive in a boardroom, not a wife in her own kitchen. I spoke with the chilling precision of someone presenting a crucial report. As Leonard himself proposed on Friday, we've implemented a complete separation of budgets. And since family event catering was not part of our original agreement, it is now billed separately. The standard rate is $350. This includes menu planning, the purchase of high-quality ingredients, 6 hours of labor at a private chef's rate in New York City, table service, and post-meal cleanup. Every single word was cold. Calculated. Stripped of all emotion. I was speaking their language now. Money. Numbers. Transactions. The only language they truly respected. That's when Leonard finally snapped. Not with words, but with a violent, desperate movement. He lunged toward me, trying to snatch the tablet from my hands. As if destroying it could somehow erase the damning reality displayed on its screen. "That's enough, Marianne." "Give me that," he growled, his voice low and thick with barely restrained rage. "What do you think you're doing? You're embarrassing us in front of my parents." His fury? It was utterly predictable. I'd anticipated it. I calmly stepped back, keeping the tablet well out of his reach. I looked him straight in the eye. Without a trace of fear. The woman who used to shrink at his shouting? She was gone. In her place stood an unshakable stillness. A cold, unwavering calm that unsettled him far more than the invoice itself. "Ridiculous?" I said, softly but sharply. "Let me explain what's really ridiculous, Leonard. Ridiculous was you standing in this very room, just 2 nights ago, telling me my comfortable life at your expense was over. Ridiculous is that you said it while standing on a floor I paid for. In a kitchen where every single appliance was bought with my money. Inside a house whose down payment, 80% of it, Leonard, came directly from my grandmother's inheritance." Each word landed like a hammer blow. The impact was immediate. Mr. Bennett actually took a step back, looking at his son with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. The carefully constructed story they'd built for years, the model son supporting his artist wife, it just crumbled to dust. Mentioning the inheritance? That was breaking a sacred taboo. Everyone knew it existed. But no one, ever, dared speak of it aloud. Veronica stared at me. With pure, venomous hatred. I was no longer just the insolent daughter-in-law. I was a direct threat. To her pride. To the family's carefully manufactured reputation. "You ungrateful woman," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you. We gave you a name. A place. A family." She tried her old, familiar weapons, guilt, shame. The crushing weight of the status she believed she had graciously bestowed upon me. But those bullets? They simply bounced harmlessly off the armor of truth and self-respect I had finally forged. Without a word, I turned around. Slowly. Deliberately. Almost theatrically. I walked to the refrigerator. The one now filled with my neatly labeled items. I opened the door. The light spilled out, illuminating a small army of tags bearing my name. It was a powerful image. The tangible, undeniable symbol of my independence. I reached in and took out a bottle of sparkling water, one of the expensive, useless luxuries Leonard used to mock. When I opened it, the hiss of carbonation sounded loud and defiant in the stunned silence of the kitchen. I took a long, slow sip, keeping my eyes fixed on them. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The message was as clear as the glass of water I was drinking. This is my space. These are my things. And I decide what happens here. My silence? It was my declaration of war. The absolute calm on my face seemed to finally shatter something inside him. His expression twisted into a raw mix of fury and utter humiliation. He'd lost control of the scene, of his audience, of me. Desperate to reclaim it, he resorted to his last, pathetic weapon, a threat. This ends now, Marianne, he hissed, his voice trembling, barely holding itself together. You're going to turn off that damn tablet, apologize to my parents for this circus, and start cooking something, or I swear you'll pack your things and get out of my house right now. That word, it echoed hollowly. It was his final, pathetic, dying gasp of an attempt to assert an authority he no longer possessed. I turned slowly to face him, still holding that cold bottle in my hand. As cold as my own resolve. A small, steady smile, not mocking, just utterly certain, appeared on my lips. I looked straight into his eyes, those eyes I had once loved, but that now reflected only the desperate fear of a stranger. I let the silence stretch. And then I shattered his threat with surgical calm. Allow me to correct you, Leonard, I said, my voice low and precise. It's not your house. It's mostly mine. My inheritance money is legally recorded in the purchase. I dropped that truth into the kitchen. Like a bomb. The silence that followed was explosive. I saw the dawning realization on Veronica's and Mr. Bennet's faces. They finally understood. They weren't looking at a rebellious wife. They were standing in front of the rightful owner of the house they were in. Leonard was speechless. His pathetic threat collapsed at his feet. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had flipped. Completely. I finished my water in one steady sip. And then, just as calmly, I added, the offer still stands, Leonard. $400 for the lunch service. Or, if you prefer, we can start negotiating a rental agreement. I can draft it right now. I paused, letting that sink in. Then, with restrained irony, I added, that, of course, is also a billable service. My words hung in the air. Then settled. The shock seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense. Charged. With the undeniable reality we were all facing. Veronica stared at me, eyes wide, her face shifting from disbelief to a rage so profound, it seemed physically unable to escape her throat. Mr. Bennet stood motionless, his gaze fixed on me. Not disapproving anymore. But calculating. As if reassessing a deeply failed investment. And Leonard. Oh, Leonard was pale. Almost translucent. As though my revelation hadn't just shattered his argument, but had drained the very life from him. He stood there. In the middle of my kitchen. Like a ghost. Lost in the wreckage of his own self-made disaster. Veronica, predictably, was the first to explode. Though her anger now? It no longer carried the devastating force it once had. It sounded like a storm that had somehow lost its center. "You manipulative liar," she spat, though her voice now quivered, lacking its usual commanding bite. "How dare you talk to us about money? About contracts? This is my son's house," she added, looking around as if that alone could magically reassert her power. "You've poisoned his mind," she went on, desperately clinging to her old script, the one where she was the undisputed queen, and I was merely the ungrateful servant. But now, her words rang hollow. Desperate. Like blanks fired against a wall of solid concrete. The power she had wielded for years, built on guilt, duty, and shame? It had evaporated. The moment I confronted her fantasies with the cold, hard facts of financial reality, I just ignored her. She was no longer my focus. I turned my gaze to her husband, the quiet foundation of all that authority. I looked him straight in the eyes, a deep, unwavering calm rising from within me. "Mr. Bennett," I said, my voice steady, "you're a businessman. You understand assets, liabilities, returns, and investments. My grandmother left me an inheritance, and with that money, I paid for 80% of the down payment on this property. Leonard contributed the remaining 20%, and his salary covers part of the mortgage. While my income as a designer pays for maintenance and all household expenses." I paused, keeping my voice utterly professional. "Tell me, Mr. Bennett, as a man of numbers, do you think it's fair that the majority shareholder of this asset be treated as an unpaid employee?" I was speaking his language. The undeniable language of tangible value. Of numbers that leave absolutely no room for debate. Mr. Bennett didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted from me to his son, and for an instant, I saw a flicker of something, disappointment, cross his face. Then he turned toward his wife, whose expression was tight, distorted by pure, unadulterated frustration. Finally, he looked back at me. His eyes no longer held disdain. But something new. A cool assessment. Almost a quiet respect. He didn't say a single word. But his silence? It was the clearest response I could have ever hoped for. In the court of logic and facts, the case was closed. It wasn't a victory for me. It was a sentence for Leonard. His own father, with that profound silence, had just confirmed everything I'd said. And that absolutely destroyed him. I watched him deflate. Like all the air leaving a balloon. The arrogance. The fury. The pride. All of it just vanished. Leaving behind only a hollow, empty sadness. He ran a trembling hand through his hair, desperately avoiding my gaze. And his parents. "That's enough, Marianne," he whispered, his voice trembling, barely audible. "You won. That's what you wanted, isn't it? You won. You ruined Sunday. You ruined everything." It wasn't an apology. No. It was the pathetic whine of a child. Blaming someone else for breaking a toy he'd already smashed himself. He blamed me for revealing the truth. Not realizing he was the one who had meticulously built the lie. I slowly shook my head. And a shadow of genuine sadness, a fleeting sorrow, passed through me. "I didn't ruin anything, Leonard," I said quietly. "I just held up a mirror. What you saw in it? It was already broken. Long ago. The only difference is that today, I decided to stop pretending I didn't see the cracks." I walked calmly to the kitchen island and set my tablet down on the cool quartz counter. The exact same place where my plan had first begun. My work tool. The one he used to belittle as my little drawing toy. It now rested there, motionless. Its purpose fulfilled. The invoice still glowed on the screen. A stark, digital epitaph for our marriage. exactly as it had been until that day. I took my phone from my pocket. And since we're all so intent on treating everything as business, I said, looking pointedly at Veronica, allow me one last professional gesture. I dialed a number I knew by heart. A voice answered immediately. Good afternoon. How can I help you? Good afternoon, I replied, my tone polite, almost eerily cheerful. I'd like to confirm a reservation for 3 people under the name Veronica Bennett. Yes, that's right. For lunch. Could it be on the terrace? Perfect. Thank you very much. I hung up. And I looked at them. Their faces were a portrait of utter confusion. I've reserved a table for you at one of the most exclusive restaurants on the Upper East Side, I said, my voice perfectly even. It's a gift. From me. Consider it compensation for the inconvenience and for the catering service not provided today. It wasn't a gesture of peace. No. It was a gesture of undeniable power. An elegant, chilling dismissal. I was offering them luxury. The exact same luxury they had always used to underline their supposed superiority. But this time? It came from me. Not as a plea, but as an undeniable statement of hierarchy. The silence that followed was so deep, I could practically hear the faint hum of the refrigerator vibrating in my chest. Veronica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Mr. Bennett watched me with a complicated expression. Part surprise. Part faint amusement. As if he recognized a masterstroke. Leonard, on the other hand, just sank further into his total, crushing defeat. I hadn't beaten him with shouting or with tears. No. I'd done it with precision. With a calculated courtesy that left him utterly unarmed. With absolutely no way out. He had lost. On his own battlefield of power and status. We're not going anywhere. Veronica stammered, finally, desperately looking to her husband for backup. Charles. For heaven's sake, say something. Do something. But for the very first time in all the years I'd known them, Mr. Bennett didn't side with her. He shook his head. Slowly. With a finality that left absolutely no doubt. Let's go, Veronica, he said, his voice calm, but utterly firm. I think Marianne has made herself perfectly clear. It was the final, devastating blow. The patriarch. The silent judge. He had just delivered his verdict. And it wasn't in favor of his own blood. He had chosen reason over blind loyalty. Truth over comfortable pretense. Veronica's face just crumbled. In seconds, she seemed to age 10 years. She had been betrayed by her son, who hadn't defended the family's honor, and abandoned by her husband, who refused to fight a lost war. With clumsy, fumbling movements, she grabbed her designer purse, that ridiculous symbol of a status that no longer existed, and without even looking at me, she practically stumbled toward the front door. Mr. Bennett followed her, but paused in the doorway. He looked at me for a long moment. And then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't an apology. Or approval. It was an acknowledgement. Between equals. Then he left, closing the door with a soft, final click. The echo of that sound lingered in the air, marking the end of one act and the uncertain, terrifying beginning of another. Only Leonard and I remained. In the silent, echoing house. He hadn't moved. He just stood there. In the middle of the kitchen. Shoulders slumped. Staring blankly at the empty space his parents had just vacated. After a long, heavy silence, he finally lifted his head. His eyes no longer held anger. Only confusion. Loss. And the dawning, bitter understanding of what had just truly happened. The war with his parents had ended. In total surrender. But the one between us? that had only just begun. And for the very first time, in the profound silence of my kitchen, I felt absolutely ready for it. Motionless. Turned to stone. Frozen in place. A statue amidst the ruins of his own shattered kingdom. The silence his parents left behind was heavier than any scream. I watched him for a few seconds. Waiting for a reaction. A word. Something. Anything to break that oppressive stillness. But nothing came. He finally sank onto one of the stools at the island, the very same one where he had given me his arrogant ultimatum just 2 nights earlier, and he buried his face in his hands. There was no anger left in his posture. Only the crushing, inescapable weight of total defeat. And in that instant, I felt no triumph. No satisfaction. What filled me instead was a profound emptiness. The agonizing recognition that the man I had once loved, he no longer existed. If he ever truly had. Before me wasn't a husband, but a stranger. Sitting in my kitchen. Mourning. Not the loss of his partner, but the loss of his audience. That night, we didn't speak a single word. I took my pillow and a blanket, and I settled into the guest room, the same one I used as my home office. Closing that door? It felt more final than any argument we'd ever had. It was a physical wall, symbolizing the emotional barrier he had meticulously built between us for years. The next morning, when I came downstairs, he was already gone for work. On the gleaming quartz countertop lay a note. In his rushed, familiar handwriting, "We need to talk." I didn't read the rest. I just crumpled the paper and threw it straight into the trash. We had talked enough. Now, it was time to act. I spent the day contacting attorney Julia Harper, a brilliant lawyer specializing in real estate and divorce cases, recommended by one of my clients. The conversation was clear, direct, and surprisingly liberating. For the very first time, I was planning for my future. Not ours. A week later, I met Leonard. Not at the house, but in the neutral, impersonal setting of a coffee shop. I handed him a folder. It contained a copy of the property deed, bank statements, showing the undeniable transfer of my inheritance money for the down payment, and a meticulously detailed proposal for asset division. Everything was organized into clean, precise spreadsheets. As cold and meticulous as the invoice I had once shown his mother. I watched him as he read. His face turned an ashen pale. In those stark, black and white numbers, the entire fiction that he had been the sole, benevolent provider just collapsed. Every single figure was a mirror, reflecting a truth he could no longer, ever, deny. "Marianne, please," he whispered, looking up, his voice barely a breath. "We can fix this. I promise I'll change. I'll set boundaries with my mother. I'll do anything." His promises. They sounded hollow. Empty. Echoes from a past that no longer had a place in my life. Not anymore. The relationship with his parents? It disintegrated. In the most utterly predictable way. Veronica tried calling me a dozen times the next day, alternating between furious, shrieking voicemails and falsely conciliatory, saccharine messages. I didn't answer any of them. I blocked her number. And Mr. Bennett's too. A few days later, I received an email from him. It was brief and chillingly formal. "We regret what happened on Sunday. Leonard has explained the financial side. We hope you can resolve your matters in the best way possible." It wasn't an apology. No. It was a strategic withdrawal. They knew. They had lost their access, their influence, their cherished privileges. They were simply cutting their losses. I never heard from them again. And their absence? It felt like finally opening a window after years of breathing stale, suffocating air. The fate of the house, that supposed nest of love that had become my gilded cage, was resolved with the same cold, brutal efficiency as everything else. On my brilliant lawyer's advice, I gave Leonard 2 crystal-clear options. He could buy out my share of the property, which would mean securing a mortgage for nearly 80% of its current market value. Or, we could sell, and split the profit according to our documented contributions. Of course, he couldn't afford the first option. His salary, though decent, simply wasn't enough to sustain the fragile illusion of luxury he so desperately loved to project, not without my capital. Reluctantly, he agreed to sell. Watching him sign the papers in front of Mr. Robert Thompson, the realtor, was the true, quiet, definitive end of our marriage. No tears. No shouting. Only the muted scratch of a pen signing the close of a chapter. 2 weeks later, while I was in a client meeting, he moved out. When I returned, half the closets were empty. His personal things? Gone. On the countertop, he left his keys. And a note. I'm sorry. I never knew what he was sorry for. Humiliating me? Destroying our marriage? Or simply for being caught? Through a mutual friend, I later heard he'd moved into a small, nondescript apartment near his office. Functional. Charmless. Cramped. His comfortable life was over. But not at my expense. No. It had simply collapsed under its own monumental weight. He wanted separate budgets. And he ended up with a separate life. The house sold quickly. This is New York City, after all. On closing day, I received a transfer. Large enough to guarantee not just security, but glorious, absolute freedom. With part of that money, I rented a beautiful loft in Soho brick walls. Huge windows. Warm, golden light flooding my new space, Marianne Carter Design Studio. The rest? I invested, meticulously, following Grandma Teresa's timeless advice, build your independence, sweetheart. Not anyone else's. My business began to thrive. Without Sunday lunches. Without the constant, suffocating pressure to seek approval that never came. My creativity took flight. I landed major clients. Ambitious projects. What had once been just my hobby officially became a solid, booming company. Now, when I sit in my studio, my tablet on my lap, I sometimes think about that white quartz kitchen. Not with bitterness. No. But with a quiet, profound gratitude. It was the stage of my greatest humiliation, yes. But it was also the undeniable birthplace of my liberation. These days? I cook only for pleasure. I invite friends who genuinely enjoy my food, and who fill my home with laughter, instead of cutting criticism. Leonard, Veronica, and Mr. Bennett? They're just characters in a distant, faded story. Shadows of another life. I wish them no harm. I simply wish them nothing at all. They occupy zero space in my present. The life I have now? I designed it myself. With my own rules. My own vibrant colors. My own rhythm. Friday nights are no longer something I dread. They're something I celebrate. Sometimes, I order my favorite takeout. Other times, I open a good bottle of wine and work late on a project I'm utterly passionate about, simply because I want to. I look around at this space. This place that is entirely mine. Built with my own work. My own effort. And I finally understand what true wealth means. It's not in a huge house. Or a fancy 3-course dinner. It's in the quiet, profound peace of living by your own rules. My name no longer appears on makeshift labels inside a refrigerator. No. It's engraved on my studio door. On my invoices. on my project contracts, and, most importantly, on the contract of my own happiness. That's a value no one can ever measure or take away. If I learned anything from this entire whirlwind, it's this: your worth is not an opinion others get to debate. It's not measured by a husband's approval, a mother-in-law's praise, or anyone else's fickle validation. It's a fact. For years, I allowed their warped perception of me to define my own. I let their willful blindness make me disappear. Their constant criticism convinced me I wasn't enough. I used to think if I just tried harder, cooked better, kept the house impossibly spotless, they would finally see my worth. But the problem was never my effort. The problem was their inability to recognize it. The greatest lesson wasn't teaching them my value. It was reminding myself of it. The brutal irony? Leonard was right about one thing. It was time to end the comfortable life at someone else's expense. He just picked the wrong person. The comfortable life was his. Built on my inheritance. Sustained by my invisible labor. And decorated with my emotional energy. He and his parents had been basking in the benefits of a partnership where only one partner paid the full, exorbitant price. My story isn't unique. Millions of women around the world are silent partners in their own lives, contributing invisible capital, time, energy, love, organization, assets that never appear on any balance sheet. Yet, without them, everything would simply collapse. That invoice I showed on my tablet? It was never really about $350. It was a profound statement of principles. A boundary I should have drawn long before. Putting a price on my work was never about getting rich. It was my fierce declaration that what I do isn't free. Sometimes, the only way to make people truly understand the value of what you do is to starkly show them the cost of not having it. Boundaries aren't walls to keep others out. They're sacred lines we draw to protect ourselves. To teach the world, unequivocally, how we deserve to be treated. And the hardest, most vital lesson of all is this: you are the one who must hold that pencil. No one else will draw the line for you. True strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it reveals itself in the quiet certainty of a firm decision. My power didn't come from a screaming conflict. It was born in the deep, chilling calm of that Friday night when his humiliation met not my tears, but my unwavering smile. We live in a society that often teaches women to defend themselves through raw emotion. To cry. To beg. To explain. But there is immense, untapped power in logic. In serene, unyielding resolve. In using the very tools of the system that tries to hold you down to set yourself utterly free. My tablet, that little drawing toy he once mocked, became my sword. My intimate knowledge of home management and finances became my impenetrable shield. I didn't need to raise my voice. I simply presented the facts. And facts, unlike opinions, are not up for debate. And if you, listening to my story, have ever felt invisible, underestimated, or taken for granted, I want you to know something vital. Your work, your effort, your time? They matter. Even if no one else is keeping count. Don't wait for humiliation to finally spark you into valuing what you do. Start today. Make a mental list of everything you contribute. Every task. Every detail you keep running without recognition. Be your own accountant. Acknowledge your invisible capital. Because the very first step toward earning others' respect is respecting yourself. With a conviction that doesn't break for anyone. Your peace, your dignity, and your energy are absolutely priceless. And you don't need anyone's permission to claim them. My story found its ending. One that I wrote. I produced. And I financed myself. But I know there are thousands like mine still being written. Stories unfolding every single day in kitchens, offices, and living rooms across the world. Mine ended with the sale of a house. But in truth? It began with the purchase of my freedom. And that's an investment that never, ever loses its value. Today, my life isn't perfect. But it's entirely mine. And that ownership? The ownership of my independence? That is the only one that truly, profoundly matters. So, I have to ask you, have you ever been pushed to your absolute limit and then found your power in the most unexpected way? Have you ever had to put a price on your peace just to make someone finally understand your worth? If my story about turning a kitchen into a boardroom and an invoice into a declaration of independence resonated with you, please leave me a comment down below. Tell me your experience. I read every single one. And if, like me, you believe that every woman deserves for her value to be recognized, respected, and never, ever discounted, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can make sure that more stories of women who stopped serving dinner and started serving justice are finally heard. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I wish you all the best.